Hi guys, so I've just finished book number 16 of my summer holidays, and that is Lightning Girl by Alesha Dixon. Now this is a book I openly approached with some cynicism. I was quite sceptical, I must admit, and previously I had actually mentioned on Twitter that I wasn't overly keen on the idea of these celebrity books filling the shelves of supermarkets, perhaps at the expense of what I deem some maybe more deserving children's authors. I was actually sent this copy by Scholastic, along with a couple of other copies for my classroom, so I must admit I'm very grateful for that, and big shout out to Scholastic there. It's taken a while for me to get around to reading it, but I was encouraged by Ashley Booth last week to give this one a go, and I went into school and got it. I must admit I was pleasantly surprised. It is a very easy read. It's a book that I read in a couple of sittings. It's a book that I'd say sits at about 290 pages, but if you look at the pages, the word spread is quite large, and there are often pictures taking up quite a bit of space on the page, so quite an easy read. Compared to a lot of the books I've read recently, which are perhaps meatier, heavier, more descriptive year 5 and 6 texts maybe, this was a text I'd feel very confident putting in lower key stage 2. I think my year 4 class last year, as I say, had a couple of copies, and boys and girls alike were enjoying reading them, which was amazing to see. Now, a brief run through of the story. The story focuses on a girl, Aurora Beam. And before we get started, what I will say is we know this book's written by Alesha Dixon. The protagonist of this book is a female, a mixed race female, which I think does wonderful things in terms of making a relatable character, a role model that some other books don't have, and very few books I've read recently actually do have. So that is certainly doing something good there. Now, it focuses on the story of a girl, Aurora Beam. Aurora is a young girl. I believe she's at primary school. She essentially, she's not an overly popular girl. She has one very good friend, but she's not in the cool crowd at school. Now, she spends most of her time living at home with her dad. Her mum lives in the family house, but is often away on work. Aurora has a brother and a sister and a dog who she's very, very fond of and spends most of her home time with. Now, a strange thing happens to Aurora early on in the story, and that is that lightning pours out of Aurora's hands. She'd never had anything like this before. It was really new to Aurora and quite scary. Now, as the story unfolds a little bit and she gets chatting to her mother, it emerges that all of the females in this sort of family bloodline have had this power, the power to essentially strike lightning out of their palms and change the light dynamic in a room. And it emerges that when her mum is supposedly on work trips, she is in fact out saving the world and sort of crushing evil. Now, at first, this is something, as I say, that really worries Aurora. She doesn't want to be different. She thinks people will perhaps tease her at school. She thinks it's something that makes her different in not a good way, in a bad way. But as the story develops, we find that Aurora is able to use these powers for good. Her dad is, he essentially is a very high profile figure at the local museum. Can't remember the word off the top of my head, but essentially he's holding an exhibition for this very rare stone that has come into the museum's possession. This stone is a highly attractive, highly expensive piece of property. And without giving too much away, we might find a situation where Aurora is needed to keep that stone safe. Now, as I say, there's certainly, just looking at like classroom ideas and how we could use this book from a teaching perspective, I think from an inclusion point of view, it's fantastic, as I say, to have a mixed race character. It's another book where we've got a female protagonist, which is really, really cool. I think there's certainly some mention, like the family situation is a little bit tricky, in that the mum and dad almost have a trial sort of separation, and seeing that happen got me thinking that perhaps some children, I'm sure lots of children, have that situation themselves, and it might be something that's quite handy to read in terms of like looking at how Aurora approached that situation, how she saw things developing, and maybe they could take something from that. There was also the situation between Aurora having older siblings. She had an older brother and a younger sister. In terms of her relationship with her older brother, that wasn't the strongest. The older brother didn't really want much to do with her at the beginning. He kept himself to himself. But it was lovely to see, as the story developed, how Aurora was able to sort of build that rapport with her siblings, and towards the end they got on much better. What was also cool as well is seeing how the value of friendship between Aurora and her best friend Kizzy. They stuck together through thick and thin, and although they weren't always able to sort of fulfill commitments to each other, they didn't let that affect their friendship. Another thing which I thought was cool about this book was how the sort of perceived cool crowd that Aurora wasn't in actually sort of let down their barriers and became really cool, nice, friendly people. It wasn't, perhaps at schools you get that dynamic where there's different groups and people don't mix between groups, but opportunities in this book evolved to allow different groups to mingle, and some really lovely friendships evolved on the back of that. The other thing I would say about this book, now looking at this cover, I don't think anyone would really argue that traditionally, and this isn't my point of view, but traditionally, this is a book that I would imagine you would expect a girl to pick up and read. Now, as I say, I put this book in my classroom last year, and it was fantastic to see that I had 2 copies, and it was fantastic to see that for the course of like 3 or 4 months that they're in my classroom, I can honestly say that the books were equally borrowed and shared and enjoyed by boys and girls alike. I think seeing that firsthand was lovely, and I think that for me was quite an eye-opener actually, to see how to see how literature can be sort of very open to different genders, and there shouldn't be like a set boy book or a set girl book. I don't think it's necessary at all. Really, really good book. As I say, it's much lighter in context than a lot of books I read. Would I suggest it as a book for like using in English lessons for descriptive writing and narrative? No. But is it a good book for the classroom? Absolutely. And do I regret, or do I take back some of my negative words or skepticism to celebrity authors? Yeah, absolutely. So hope you enjoyed it. Really grateful for you watching, guys. This was a bit longer than some of my other videos. Hope you don't mind. Please, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Even better if you could hit subscribe so I can grow this channel. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Have a nice day.